Helena has already introduced. My name is Jo, and I work as Associate Product Manager at FeedbackFruits. I work in a product team to develop AI-powered solutions for education, and that includes tools like automated feedback, which I think some of you may have already used and love. And here I have with me Wilco, the person that we really need to thank right here for the existence of automated feedback in the first place. So Wilco, would you like to introduce yourself here?
Thank you so much, Jo. Pleasure to be here. I'm Winkel. I've been working at Erasmus for 20 years now. The first 10 years as an assistant professor educational psychology, and the last 10 years more based on innovation of education. And it's in that position that I contacted FeedbackFruits to start this great project.
And I want to mention here that Wilco is an initiator at the SURF Special Interest Group for AI in Education, and it is a collaborative organization for IT innovation for Dutch education and research. So Wilco's work is really impacting thousands of people's lives in the country and beyond. So again, thank you so much for being here with us. As the title may have suggested, we are going to talk about AI today, and more specifically AI in education. It's a very broad topic. So a lot of researchers and academics actually talk about it for days. There's conferences for it. For this session, we are not intending it to be a comprehensive guide to this topic. We will invite you to treat it as a mere starting point to learn about how a powerful technology like AI can impact the education sector. With that said, we do want you to be able to take away something from this session. So the first one is to be able to understand and to talk about some trends and practices that you have, that we can see of AI in education. The second one is to be able to discuss with us or among yourself some specific use cases of AI, such as the automated feedback tool that we have, and how at FeedbackFruits we approach AI and data. And the third one is to be able to reflect on the challenges of AI on topics such as instructor, student receptiveness, ethics, technology and pedagogy alignment, and more in your context. During this session, we encourage you to think along with us and feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A. We will be relaying those questions and we will try to address them during the discussion as we go. Before we jump into the discussion, I find it important that we share some common ground on terminologies. I want to acknowledge that there's probably 1,000 different ways that you can define AI. This is because of its rapid evolution in the past decades and a vast range of capabilities it has. Because at the end of the day, let's not forget that AI was created to mimic human intelligence, and we as humans are very mysterious, and we're probably the most capable and intelligent machines on Earth. To scope the discussion, however, we will give it a generic definition on artificial intelligence. This is taken from a report by the Open University in England on AI education. Here it is defined as computer systems that have been designed to interact with the world through the capabilities and intelligent behaviors that we will think of as essentially human. At the same time, let's acknowledge and understand that AI as itself is a very interdisciplinary discipline. It takes knowledge and development from all sorts of different domains, including but not limited to linguistics, computer science, cognitive science, philosophy, statistics, and even mechanical engineering. It's all of these human advancements that happened in the past 40, 50 years that really made the development of AI possible and popular. And the popularity is not without reasons. Compared to some traditional computer algorithms and programs, AI offer many advantages and more possibilities, and it's built to handle large data, and it's actually built on large data, and with that variation and unpredictability. Because of these capabilities, machines can now literally teach themselves how to learn to a certain extent. They can recognize patterns, they can make predictions, they can detect anomalies that could be indiscernible to human eyes. And at the same time, it's very flexible and very accessible. Once it's built, you can update it, you can distribute it to thousands and millions of people on computers and cell phones and provide services and information at the tip of your finger. And because of these flexibilities and accessibility, it is able to address individual and group differences. And this is utterly important when we're talking about AI powered solutions in education. So how do we reap the benefits of AI? So as some of you may know, the Netherlands has been some of the front runners in implementing innovative technologies in the public life. and AI and education are no exception. So here I would like to first ask Wilco, could you shed some light on how the Dutch educational institutions and sector have been using AI to solve problems in education?
What we see specifically is there's a lot of language-related AI use of AI, be it giving feedback on writing, but also learning languages, and even students making use of AI technology to write papers for them. So a lot of language-related AI tools, and with the primary education, we see a lot of personalization of learning content to students. So guiding them to appropriate learning resources. Those two domains are most top of mind. And then of course the AI chatbot to connect between students and professionals, or even give answers to students on a 24/7 basis.
That's really cool. I'm actually interested in knowing a little bit more about the chatbot functionality that you just talked about. In what kind of context did you see that chatbot?
Especially, so the SURF, the Dutch Innovation Agency, is promoting build-up of experience, specifically on a Microsoft backend. Microsoft is huge in natural language processing and AI. So you train students on, they train the system on frequently asked questions, and then it learns from contact between students and experts, and then after a while it starts proposing answers to the expert, and the expert allowing for the answer or having his own answer. But it starts learning and intervening or supporting the contact between students and experts and teachers.
And in this case, is it in higher education specifically?
Yeah. In this case, it is with the business school that want to have a premium experience to students, and not have days or 2 days wait from either support personnel or even the teacher on questions that are easily answerable.
And just now, you also mentioned that there's a lot of services that are related to language, and we at FeedbackFruits, of course, has a product that's using natural language processing for that. So in the current climate of the Dutch education sector, why do you think language is so important, or writing itself is so important?
Specifically for writing, I think we come back to it later on in the presentation, but the writing skill is very hard to master, and it takes so much time that the pressure on the university for increasing student numbers is so heavy on our staff that we hardly make time to support students in acquiring that skill. And so this AI module greatly helped us in supporting students and not necessarily adding work pressure to the teachers.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a nice teaser for us in some later sections that we're going to talk about in this presentation. So I think that knowledge on the climate that we have on AI and education in the Netherlands is very insightful, and it does help us contextualize an environment where we can see that technological innovations are valued and celebrated. So what does AI actually mean for FeedbackFruits' mission and future? So as a company, we pride ourselves in innovations, and we seek to do our part to enhance education with emerging technologies, and AI is one of them. We believe that along with our partner institutions, we are at the forefront of an evolution where education is getting digitalized, scaled, and more accessible to more people, and that is great. But as Wilco already mentioned before, there's a lot of needs and problems that emerge with those trends. So we see hundreds and thousands of resources available for teaching, and that's why we need personalization or recommendation systems for recommending materials and contents. We see new and ever-emerging learning activities and pedagogies. Think about a 500 student class with written assignments, but 3 or 4 teachers able to grade them. Those are the problems and needs that we see right now. And we want to leverage the power of AI to address those problems because we believe that while education is becoming more accessible to more people, learning should always be personalized and contextualized. That's why from a problem that Wilco has already shed light on, we developed automated feedback. It is the tool that provides instantaneous feedback to enhance students' academic writing. And with this, we hope to stimulate deeper learning and at the same time, give teachers the time to provide higher level feedback. So Wilco, you already touched upon the problem a little bit, but could you tell us a bit more on how you first identified the problems in feedback for academic writing there?
And again, this was the business school. They have, so in general, we have increasing student numbers, but the government budget remains the same. So more students per teacher every year over the past 20 or 30 years. And the business school, they have about 1,500 students, first year students every year. And the innovation manager came up to me and said, we have to think about something that we can do to support students in writing, because we see that they struggle with their bachelor thesis. And as it turned out, they kept postponing support for writing, or academic writing, until their bachelor thesis. But even then, it was a teacher with about 50 students. So a bachelor thesis, bachelor student would get 2 or 3 sessions with a group of students with a professor. So students started complaining about the lack of support because of the difficulty in proper writing. So they wanted to have support for the skills program earlier on in their studies. For example, the first year of the bachelor studies. But then there are enormous amounts of students that you have to support. And students are very demanding. They don't accept feedback after weeks. And even if they get feedback after weeks, we know from cognitive psychology, educational psychology, that if it takes so long for them to receive feedback, they hardly learn anything of it. So they wanted to have more technology in place to allow for personalized support of students, but in a much quicker way, and then not adding pressure to the teacher.
So yeah, I see that you identify a problem there. How did you go from, I have a problem, to let's think of some technology? How did you come to the process of trying to propose as AI to solve the problem? Why did you think AI would be a suitable solution there?
For me, of course, providing feedback immediately tips FeedbackFruits automatically comes to mind, of course. I went to Joost and Ewout to discuss about opportunities I saw within the AI corner. And in the beginning, it was a bit alien to the technology stack of FeedbackFruits, but gradually Joost, the lead developer, he increasingly got more confident in getting in repositories and getting in advancements of AI that are open for the public, and to get it in a product of FeedbackFruits. So that was it was a high level idea, a hope, and it was Joost, I think, who made the first steps in getting the knowledge in of the public domain in the product of FeedbackFruits.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a nice transition into my next slide, which is on the development process. But first, I want to talk about the problem a little bit more. As a student, I deeply sympathize with the student problem that you talked about. I often were in situations where I would submit my 10, 20-page essay or paper that I desperately need feedback on. And I often work on it very late at night, maybe 2 a.m. in the morning in a computer lab. I'm like, if there's only someone there to actually help me correct some of these citations and references to make me feel confident about submitting it, that would be great. So yeah, the first time that I actually saw automated feedback, I also thought that, wow, I wish I had this when I was a student. Well, but now I'm working on it. So that's even better. And I'm certain many people here resonate with the story that you just told, Wilco. So we got this high level problem from you, and at FeedbackFruits, we went into work. First, we actually consulted, not just technology, but also academic literature on academic writing, feedback literacy, as well as student autonomy, to have a solid pedagogical foundation. Because as an edtech company, we do want to prioritize pedagogy before technology. And the product and user research was also done to make sure that our solutions are relevant and usable for students and teachers. We also trained and tested with manually collected data because we want to make sure that whatever models and algorithms that we develop, they're able to provide feedback that are relevant to students and teachers. And also from previous research, we know that general purpose software support on writing is usually not that helpful when it comes to a very specific use case, such as academic writing. And after having implemented those product designs, we are still constantly iterating with user feedback, usage, and of course, quality assurance. So all of that went in, and we had automated feedback. So since March, we have already released this tool to all the teachers and students who are using FeedbackFruits tool suite. The teachers can set up the assignment with a few simple clicks, and even with the help of a few built-in templates that we have on case study, research paper, essay, as well as this thesis. And at the moment, we offer around 30 criteria in beta and stable in 5 categories of elements of writing. These criteria are very much focused on lower and medium order concerns in academic writing. We consulted some papers on some of the most common mistakes that students make in academic writing. And we decided to address issues like citations and references, academic languages and formatting. And after this, students can upload their assignments and get formative and learning-focused feedback on their writing, actually within the documents itself. So they can see how the feedback is actually interacting with it, all within minutes of uploading the document. We want to stress here that the tool is not there to replace the instructor. We do not want to do that at all. On the contrary, the tool is existing to empower teachers to focus on complex skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, domain-specific knowledge, because feedback on those higher order concerns need to be contextualized and personalized to provide the most value to learners. And that's where teachers' value really come in. And at the same time, we develop automated feedback with a vision to help students develop their feedback literacy. So it can be combined with other tools like peer feedback or peer review or assignment review, where peer feedback and in-depth instructor feedback take the stage. So with the abundance of feedback, we want students to be able to be empowered and enabled to iterate on their work and take ownership of their writing and learning. We're very proud to say that automated feedback has now been used by over 6,000 students around the world for almost 9,000 submissions. So we really know that our work is impacting the life of a lot of people. So if you have ever used automated feedback before, we thank you for being part of that journey. We're also very happy to say that many instructors have found the tool to be useful in helping students in large class sizes or small ones to identify areas for improvement in their writing. We also heard that the tool has helped to boost student confidence to deliver good work. So that's even having a psychological effect, which we probably didn't expect in the first place. Do keep in mind that automated feedback is but one useful application of AI that we can see in education at the moment. There are many possibilities out there with this technology. In a systematic review that was published in 2019, 3 years ago, the researcher already identified 4 themes of common applications of AI in education. And there are profiling, prediction, intelligent tutoring systems, assessment and evaluation, and adaptive systems, and personalization. As we are moving forward with innovation at FeedbackFruits, we are actually interested in knowing what you are thinking about AI. So what do you think we should help with? We have put up a poll in the poll section, so please vote there to let us know. In which area would you like to see and use more AI-powered solutions? While people are voting there, I want to ask Wilco another question. So what are your thoughts on these themes? Is there any one of them that you're particularly interested in talking about, or in general?
2 come to mind. One is the profiling and prediction cluster, and the other one, the assessment and evaluation. To start with the latter, we are now trying to do with the medical department is to see whether we can support teachers in grading open answers. So to get in technology that's able to group answers, similar answers, and then try to bring them in order from least coherent to most coherent, so a teacher can assess similar answers in a similar way to improve his consistency, but also to improve speed. So that's another use of AI for feedback or for grading and for formative grading. The other one is the profiling part that with the Dutch government, we had a lot of a national program on learning analytics and getting data and the data that students leave to predict their learning outcome. And what we are now trying to do is to have predictive models and AI in those type of predictions. And there's a lot of attention, of course, with privacy and ethics. So it's a domain that you have to be very careful in, but there's a lot of potential as well. So we in the Netherlands, we have a reference frame for ethical use and private for all higher education institutions. We signed up for a common reference for privacy and ethics for use of study data. And within that reference framework, we start to develop models on study success and student engagement.
And you mentioned that the institutions are using it on an institution-wide level. So what do they plan on doing with those student data? What kind of decisions are they trying to make with those?
Specifically engagement. So what we value in Rotterdam, our students, they agreed on allowing to use their data, but they very much remind of us being transparent. So we are using that data on an institutional level, but we are feeding it back to the students as well. And it's all about getting them to increase their reflection on their own learning. So how am I doing on a progress in a course, but also how do I compare to other students in this course? So, and then of course at the institutional level, we try to see whether we can have students go through their curriculum and see whether choices they make for certain courses are beneficial to their learning, or even might be detrimental to their learning. Certain combinations of courses they take, you should have an introduction course before you have an advanced course, for example, but some students overestimate their own abilities and start with an advanced course, for example.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So we actually got our poll result back, and the winner was assessment and evaluation, which I am frankly not really surprised about. And we already talked about that, but I also kind of want to circle back to that topic here. You spoke of the difficulty of grading open-ended questions in a medical education context. That is very interesting, as we actually had a speaker yesterday who talked about medical education, and we talked about the importance of programmatic assessment and how there's an abundance of information that educators really need to make sense out of. So besides use cases like open-ended questions, did you see any other specific use case in your context in this end, assessment and evaluation?
Nothing that pops to mind, but of course the programmatic assessment takes in many more formative assessment points. So if you don't add technology into the equation, the work pressure even more increases too. So you want to take in many more data points of students showing their mastery of knowledge or skills, but you want to do it on a regular basis. But if you don't get in technology, it adds up even more on the work pressure of teachers. So on the programmatic assessment, I can really imagine technology can be beneficial for students to learn on a regular basis. And of course, in the end exam, to take in, because the Erasmus, with, for example, the School of Economics, they switched to multiple choice almost throughout their entire studies, throughout their entire courses. And multiple choice isn't the strongest way to assess students on mastery of their knowledge or skills. So you do want to have more open-ended questions. And if AI could assist there, it would be of great benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I definitely see a trend of more and more educators and educational institutions moving away from multiple choice questions to really trying to assess and evaluate students' knowledge in a more holistic way, for example, with open-ended questions. So I can imagine the amount of workload that really piles up when educators and assessors trying to navigate through that mountains of information in this. But yeah, that's definitely something that we have on our mind right now. And it's a very interesting use case to look into. And previously, you mentioned something about the concerns for privacy and for ethics for using student data like engagement and achievement on different levels. And that is, but one of the risks and challenges that we're seeing, of course, in applying AI in general. Let's talk about that a bit more. So we have identified 5 themes of challenges in education phases here. So again, we want to ask the audience, what is your biggest concern for using AI in your context? Is it privacy or ethics and equity? How do we build governance structure that makes sure that the use of AI is ethical, inclusive, and trustworthy? Is it instructor and student receptiveness? Are teachers and students ready and willing to incorporate AI into their teaching and learning experiences? Is it technology and pedagogy alignment? Do AI-powered solutions really enhance learning? And how do we evaluate that impact? And institutional systems and culture also come into play here, because a lot of institutions around the world are still in the process of digitalization, and they could face the problems like data silos. So they work pretty much in their own bubble, even within the institution. So how do we build culture and systems that effectively implement AI-powered solutions, or is it data governance? As we mentioned before, AI is built for and built on data, but the saying garbage in, garbage out is very essentially true in systems like this. So how do we ensure that quality, integrity, and management of the data are properly managed and governed? So Wilco, from your perspective, what is the major challenge that can make or break implementation of an AI application?
What is top of my mind for the last few months is the how do we research the effectiveness, the added value of AI tools in a course? So to get up frameworks to assess whether it adds, or even it might even be detrimental if it's not used right. So more of the evidence-based. And the topic that comes most to mind is the relation between teachers and students. For example, within the universities, within our university, I really am very sensitive to signals to see whether teachers remain engaged in their courses. So some of our teachers, they put up AI and walk away to their research, just to have as a replacement of their engagement in the course. And it never aimed at dehumanizing support during a course, to get a student and a teacher engaged, and to get out the more boring stuff of teaching, so the references and checking and so on, but then to use that time for quality interaction with students. So what I'm very interested in these days is, how does AI impact the relation between a teacher and a student? When does a student want to have the intimacy of a personal coach with an AI solution? And when does he want to have the teacher oversight onto the AI solution, so that the teacher can look in your personal progress and then build on those outcomes? So to have some clarity on how am I using the AI in my course, and in a way that it adds to the quality of education, rather than that it is it's switched on and the teacher walks away.
Yeah, so humans have to be in the loop, right? They need to be there to make some kind of intervention and make sense of what the AI is doing for the learning and teaching experience. I completely agree there. We got the results back from this poll again, and the biggest concern that our audience has for using AI in their context is privacy, ethics, and equity, which is also very reasonable. And this is frankly a very hot topic that many of us are discussing right now, especially with the use of data that are so close to us and so personal. Could you share more thoughts on that front, actually? What are your thoughts on privacy and ethics and equity, and how can we mitigate some of the potential negative consequences on that end?
What I'm looking at the moment is the Dutch government and all the municipalities are using AI a lot in their services to the citizens. And they have learned very many valuable lessons on how not to use AI and data, and because they have been overusing predictive models and it really impacts citizen life. So they are it's a sector that's similar to ours, the public education. They share many of the shared core values in serving the public rather than disqualifying cohorts or citizen. So they are sharing. There's a lot of learnings in another sector that's related to us, and we've set up a process framework in which ethics and privacy are cornerstones in every pipeline, from initial conception of an idea towards implementing it and maintaining the AI solutions. And what I very much like there is that they expect their employees not to follow the AI module 100%, even so they monitor the use of the AI models by their employees. If they agree on more than 70 or 80% on the AI outcome, then there's an intervention, because the models are only an approximation of reality. It only offers 4 or 5 criteria to predict 70% of the variance in the data. Yeah. So it isn't perfect, and their governance is set up in such a way that the use of the models are overseen. If an employee takes over too many answers, agrees too many times with the AI prediction, there's an intervention there.
I see. So we really need to be critical again of what the AI generates, right? Because as you mentioned, it's a predictive model, and it's not 1 or 0. It's some kind of number that it approximates, and it's never going to be 0. So human judgment here is key. And we resonate with that a lot here at FeedbackFruits as well. And we think that, again, it goes back to my first statement about humans being some of the most mysterious, complicated, and intelligent machines on Earth. And they're there to mimic us. And we don't even understand how we work. So the machines are probably not doing better than us at this moment, at least. So with that in mind, I want to actually talk a little bit about how at FeedbackFruits we try to mitigate those consequences, negative potentially consequences here. And first, we followed the guidelines for trustworthy AI by the European Commission. This is an overarching guideline that the EU has published for the use and development of AI within Europe. And it talks deeply about ethics. So for us, this approach of ethics by design is very important. That means that we intentionally put ethics in the core of our product development process. So starting from ideation, even thinking about the idea of using AI, we're having these kind of discussions about what are the ethical values that we're trying to bring here, and the principles and procedures that we need to have in place in order to use AI critically and ethically. And currently in Auto-Mini Feedback, we are already having those designs and principles in mind. So we respect privacy and regard personal data protection very highly. For example, AI does not have access to student data without explicit consent to transparent and accountable data policy. We don't actually collect student data right now at all. And we make sure to include humans in the loop to have human agents in here. We intend for Auto-Mini Feedback, as we said before, to be used in a formative process. And while it provides some kind of numerical insights, we don't intend to provide grading for the students. Grading here should be a human action. And at the same time, the students and teachers are always having the agency to object to incorrect feedback and to inform our development, so we can use the feedback to further improve the tool. That brings us to almost the end. As I might have implied earlier, automated feedback is only our first step in the exploration of AI for education. We already sense that there are many directions to which we can contribute, and they include further enhancing student autonomy and feedback literacy. And we also are exploring personalization in insights on learning. But again, these are not set in stone. We're always in the iterative process of finding out what problems and needs exist in the education sector and what we can do to address them. And this is why we encourage you, we invite the audience here to talk to us and to bring forward your needs and frustrations so that we together can use AI to better the future of education.